Welcome to your Get That Nugget for GCSE English Literature. Today we're going to be focusing on giving you the knowledge of the plot and the structure of the plot to enable you to write in a cohesive and coherent way about the text as a whole. Specifically today we're looking at Lord of the Flies and the way that the plot evolves and the way that the text is structured. This will enable you to answer the modern text question on paper 2 of your English Literature GCSE. This session is here to complement your lessons with your teacher and is not here in any way to replace them. Now, part of what's required for AO1 is for you to fully understand the text and be able to respond to the text as a whole. In order to do that, you need to have a clear understanding of the plot and a clear understanding of the sequence of events in the plot. In addition, if you are able to write intelligently about why the writer has made certain choices about key moments in the plot and why the plot is structured in the way it is, that will only increase your marks. Now, Lord of the Flies has 12 chapters and each of those chapters is named. And one of the easiest ways to ensure that you understand the sequencing of the plot and you understand what's going on is, in the first instance, to learn all of those chapter names and the order they come, and then to be able to boil down the content of that chapter to maybe one sentence. So the first chapter in Lord of the Flies is called The Sound of the Shell. And in the first chapter, the boys find themselves on the island. Piggy finds the conch, the choir and the others arrive, and Ralph is voted in as leader. Now, because the conch represents democracy, because the conch represents society, the novel is starting off with the boys all still in society's rules, all still bound by society's expectations. And so we're going to boil it down to: boys arrive on the island. Piggy finds the conch. And uses it to call them together. It symbolises democracy. And is used to vote Ralph as leader. So you have two short sentences that tell you what happened in chapter 1. Chapter 1 is called The Sound of the Shell. And eventually these things will start to trigger memories that enable you to understand the order of the plot. The second chapter is called Fire on the Mountain. During this chapter, all of the boys establish the rules. However, there is a fear amongst them that there is a beast living somewhere on the island, that they've seen a snake. The snake is obviously representative of evil, linking back to the Garden of Eden. And whilst Ralph tries to eliminate the fear, because fear creates violence, creates uncertainty, creates chaos, Jack is enjoying it. And ultimately, Jack and his choir leave the fire to get out of control, and one of the little ones is killed. So, rules established. Suggestion that there may be a beast. Ralph tries to calm people. But Jack winds it up and ultimately lets the fire get out of control, killing a little one. And this is the first time in the novel that we see that violence, we see that unlawful death, we see that sort of edge towards evil. The third chapter is called Huts on the Beach, and this is where Ralph tries to establish essentially a society. He tries to build huts for shelter, whereas Jack wants to go off and hunt, wants to go and kill a pig. And Jack and Ralph in this situation essentially represent the conflict within man, the conflict between the superego and the id. And so throughout the novel we can see the conflict between Jack and Ralph not only as a conflict that splits the island, but as an inner conflict between man. So Ralph wants to build huts whilst Jack wants to hunt. Start of serious conflict between them. Okay, then in the fourth chapter, Painted Faces and Long Hair, the choir become the hunters essentially, and they liberate themselves, and by growing their hair long and painting their faces, they are essentially putting on a mask which conceals their identity, conceals what they are linked with in society, and they become essentially free from civilization and then become uncivilized. So hunters paint faces and liberate themselves from society. Their obsession with hunting means they neglect the fire and they miss a rescue boat. And so the more savage they become, the further away they're getting from society and safety. And this is highlighted in this chapter. They become savage hunters. They miss the opportunity to be rescued. We then have chapter 5, which is called Beast from Water. And it is when they start to discuss what the beast is. They start to worry about what is out there. And we start to see the conflict between logic and panic. The hunters encouraging that panic, the hunters creating that panic and liking the fear they're creating in the Litlands, while Ralph tries to damp that down. And again, chaos is linked to a lack of civilization, a lack of order. So Jack again is getting further and further away from society. Beast from the Air is where we find out that what they've been seeing is the dead airmen. Ralph joins the hunt for the beast and they find Castle Rock. And it's at this point that Jack and Ralph again disagree. Jack sees it as a perfect fort, a perfect sort of lookout, somewhere they can defend, whereas Ralph identifies that it's a bad place for them to settle because there's no running water, there's nowhere for them to be safe, there's not really any natural shelter. So find dead airmen, but they don't know what it is at this point. Ralph and Jack disagree about Castle Rock. So you can see in all of them, we're boiling down the contents of the chapter to one sentence, which will enable you to make those links and remember the key events. So chapter 7 is Shadows and Tall Trees. When he joins the hunt, Ralph starts to see the appeal. Ralph and Jack climb the mountain, even though it's dangerous to do so at this point, but they're both pushed on by pride and not wanting to lose. They see the beast and report back. So Ralph sees the appeal. Now, obviously, these are quite brief descriptions, but because you have a knowledge of the book, this is a sentence will trigger your memory as to what else happens in that chapter. So, at this point, they still think the beast is a beast. We know it's an airman, they don't. Jack steals the conch to try and get power, kills the pig and leaves its head on a stick as an offering for the beast. Simon tries to warn the boys that he thinks the beast is the evil within us, and they all ignore him. So Jack takes the conch for power. And kills a pig, leaving the head as an offering. Simon tries to tell the boys that the beast is them. Okay, so again, really brief, but just to trigger those memories about what happens. So this chapter is called Gift for the Darkness. The gift is the pig's head. All of these things will trigger your memories. Chapter 9, the boys are celebrating the hunt. They become sort of almost intoxicated by what they've done. Meanwhile, Simon has found the airman and he goes to try and tell the boys what's happening. He breaks into their circle where they're dancing and celebrating. And in that sort of frenzied moment, they don't recognise him and they tear him apart. They have become the beast. So Simon finds the airman, tries to tell boys, but they fail to recognise him and tear him apart. And again, actually doing it on flashcards means that you can test yourself. You can test yourself on the names of the chapters and on the content. So Ralph acknowledges that what's happened to Simon is murder. He is feeling guilty about this. He was part of that circle and he is the only person that takes responsibility. He says that what happened was murder, and while Piggy tries to talk him down, Ralph still feels that guilt and still understands that they've broken the law, but also they've crossed the line. Jack's group steal Piggy's glasses and the fire dies, and that represents that there is no hope of rescue. So they are left in chapter 10 with no hope. So Jack steals Piggy glasses, so the fire dies, and with it hope of rescue. And then we're into the last two chapters. Chapter 11, Castle Rock. So Piggy and Ralph try and get the glasses back. They have to go to Castle Rock where the hunters have set up camp. Jack and Roger kill Piggy by dropping a boulder on him. It is deliberate. They mean it. It is a murder. And they try to kill Ralph, but he escapes. All of this leads us to our final chapter, Cry of the Hunters. The hunters light a fire to smoke Ralph out. That fire attracts a rescue ship and the boys are saved. But the question you are left with in the book is they are saved, but at what cost and what have they lost? And so essentially you've got 24 sentences there which summarise everything that happens in the book. And if you can learn them, it will help you in your exam so that you can make sure you are writing about the right thing in relation to the right questions. What you need to do now is answer that question. So we look at how the boys deteriorate, we look at what happens to them. How did Golding's feelings about the war lead to him writing this novel?